you have a war going on between Iran on the one side and US Israel on one side. How the Indian foreign policy is positioning and recalibrating itself.
Firstly, look, do we call it a war? It looks to me more of an invasion of Iran. I would say we are just victims or spectators. The best we can do is to cut our losses, protect our core interests, developing at 7+% a year for the next 10 years. That is not impacted.
Will that entail that the Indian foreign policy will acquire a securitized approach?
The record from 2020 till today, what you see is a series of external shocks which we have faced as a nation. None of our doing, they were just imposed on us. And at every shock, we had to respond. We had to firstly defend and protect, let alone advance our interests. No nation can progress just on soft power and values alone.
We read that the Americans had given a 30-day waiver for the Russian imports. What after 1 month?
Of the fact that 90% of our energy needs are imported. In the good days we forget it, but now it's just come to hit us in a very brutal way that the reality is this. We will continue to import Russian oil because if you don't, or if you have a oil shortage or energy shortage, then all bets are off, basically the end of your economy.
We'll come to neighbourhood. We just witnessed two high-intensity elections in Nepal and Bangladesh. You also served as the High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Did you see that coming? The protests against Sheikh Hasina?
Look, I mean, it was quite well known that she was authoritarian. I mean, she was losing popularity. It just kind of spiraled out of control, and all it needed was a small trigger or a spark, basically, to light the fire. And that is what happened.
We turn to China, and over the last few months we saw some developments where both the sides were talking to each other, and
there was a view here that we should relook at our relationship with China. And from the Chinese side also, lots of signals were coming that they wanted to move forward, move beyond Galwan, and try to repair the damage.
So you joined as the deputy NSA at a time when the NSA office expanded.
After the elections of Prime Minister Modi, there was a review, and it was felt that national security issues had become much more complex. Our institutions were not geared to meeting those challenges, which were organic, interlinked, unforeseen, and taken new dimensions. So that is what led to a revision or a review of the structure. And so in 2018 was when finally the new structure was approved.
We'll also talk about your work at the NatStrat and your initiatives.
The idea was that we come up with an institution which is small and which is professional, objective, which puts across the Indian perspective of global issues, on internal issues. As the India is growing, there's more interest in India. People are looking for content which is typically from Indian scholars, from the Indian mind. It's very important for us to put our viewpoint across globally. And it's also very important for us to provide a platform where others can understand us better.
Welcome to the new episode of Jan Mangan. Today we are with Ambassador Pankaj Saran. Ambassador Pankaj Saran has served as the ambassador to Russia. He was the High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Ambassador Saran also became the Deputy NSA, and he's had a distinguished career in the Foreign Service. As of now, Ambassador Saran is the convener of NatStrat, a Delhi-based strategic affairs think tank. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank
and
you.
Given the present situation, let's start our conversation, sir. And sir, coming to the situation that we see where you have a war going on between Iran on the one side and US Israel on one side, we are seeing a lot of news on how the Indian foreign policy is positioning and recalibrating itself. How do you read that? Because one view says that we are very pragmatic about our choices, and the other view says that we are responding to a pressure. What are your thoughts, sir?
Firstly, thank you, Pratik. It's a
Thank you so
great
much.
pleasure to be with you on your show, and wish you all success
Thank you so much.
in this journey that you have embarked upon. Firstly, look, do we call it a war? It looks to me more of an invasion of Iran. Secondly, you said, are we on the back foot or what is our role? I would say we are just victims or spectators of this military campaign launched against Iran. And in such a situation, the best we can do is to cut our losses, to protect our core interests, and to ensure that our basic objective, of developing at 7+% a year for the next
Right.
10 years, that is not impacted. Now, this is a tall order because the war or the invasion or whatever terminology you want to use has come right to our doorstep,
Right.
to our neighborhood, and in a area and a region which has a direct impact on our livelihood, on our energy security, on our national security. So the stakes for us are very high, and therefore any choices we make have to be also very carefully thought through.
Right.
At one level, it's evident what we need to do. And it's one level, it's also evident what our vulnerabilities are. Uh, but it's unfortunate what's going on. I mean, we seem to have gone back in time. It reminds me of the 1973 oil crisis,
Right.
of all the previous Gulf wars, of the mayhem and the turbulence in the Middle East, in West Asia, the Gulf, endless wars directed to regime change, or even in this case, addressing the nuclear threat. I mean, in the case of Iraq, it was supposed to be weapons of mass destruction. So this is where we are. I mean, just as an opening remark.
And when it comes to the stakes for India, the primary ones being the energy supplies and the securing, uh, we read that the Americans had given a 30-day waiver for the Russian imports. What after 1 month? How does India secure its supply lines again,
Yeah.
its
So,
critical
firstly,
energy
this
requirements?
is a reminder to us
Right.
of the fact that 90% of our energy needs are imported.
Right.
In the good days, we forget it,
Right.
but now it's just come to hit us in a very brutal way that the reality is this, that 90% of your energy needs are met through imports. And if you have to meet those needs, you have to have the ability to pay for them. And if you have to pay for them, you need to earn the dollars or hard currency. And to do that, you need to have export markets. You need to be able to export either goods or services. So the whole thing is a circular situation and economy. Uh, the Americans have decided to weaponize the energy procurement and supply market in the world. And we have to adjust to what is the new reality. Um, on the Russia thing, I think, since 2022, we have been importing. Um, I think our government has shown that it's ready and willing to import Russia oil. And what these events have shown over the last 2, 3 weeks is that it is just as well that we were importing Russian oil. If we had not, then where would have been our situation? Because this is dried up, at least
Right.
temporarily. So I think this 1 month waiver or temporary permission, what people are saying to us is that it is more or less, it's more directed to the American public opinion rather than actual facts on the ground. We will continue to import Russian oil. Because if you don't, or if you have a oil shortage or energy shortage, then all bets are off. I mean, that's the basically the end of your economy or end of your economic goals. So for us, it's more or less an existential issue. We don't really have much choice. If all sources or all supplies of oil are choked, then where do we go? Of course, we've also committed we'll buy more from the Americans.
Right.
But this is a transactional US administration. I mean, they are seeing basically every issue as a transaction.
Right.
And so, in that same spirit, we have said we'll buy from you also. We've announced to set up a refinery there. So, whether it is Russia, whether it is Venezuela, whether it is the Gulf, whether it is America, whether it is Canada, I mean, we have to ensure that we import from everywhere.
You just mentioned the word transactionalism. Uh, Given your experience in the foreign service uh, and the present times when we are seeing many countries using brute force as an arm of their foreign policies, do you feel that at this point of time, taking a moral stand still has that strength and still carries that weight? For a country like India, which is growing and which has a certain stand.
See, look, I'm very glad that you're asking this question because you represent the younger generation. And it's good to see that the values and the moral premium on foreign policy is something which uh, resonates with you. But the unfortunate fact is that we are being driven to a situation where values and morality and principles are today being thrown out of the window. Now, the question is, how do we adjust to it? I mean, do we stick to those values, morals, principles, or do we also adjust to the realities of the world and the power imbalance and the fact that the world is not equal? Now, the United States is the most powerful, richest country in the world. They have now chosen to weaponize their strengths and to leverage them and to use them. I mean, and to do it without any hesitation. Uh, at this point in time, I think we have to simply protect ourselves and defend our interests and navigate this very uncertain, turbulent world. And if it means, a trade-off between morality, values, principles, and hardcore national interests of survival, then maybe we may have no choice but to make the trade-off. That's in the immediate, but in the medium long term, I mean, yes, of course, we do have allegiance to values, principles, morals, which we will continue to exercise.
We turn to China, and over the last few months, we saw some developments where both the sides were talking to each other, and the Commerce Ministry came out with a certain statement that they are relaxing the norms, some of those restrictions that were in place regarding the Chinese investments. Is India's is this specific phase driven more by Trump, or there's some other ingenious factors at work also?
Yes and no. I mean,
Okay.
the normalization process with China began in October 2024 after the Galwan standoff when Prime Minister Modi met President Xi Jinping in Kazan.
Right.
And that meeting was enabled because the Chinese agreed to our positions on two of the remaining roadblocks on the border, which is Demchok and Depsang.
Right.
And that predates Trump. So that's one part of the answer, that there was a view here that we should relook at our relationship with China. And from the Chinese side also, lots of signals were coming that they wanted to move forward, move beyond Galwan, and try to repair the damage. So the trigger or the impulse has come autonomously, I would say.
Okay.
But definitely, both India and China were also hedging because they were both watching the US elections and drawing their own lessons about a possible Trump victory. Uh, we were not sure which side this will go, a Trump administration, nor were the Chinese. So there was an element of that too. So the US factor was a factor in the rapprochement, but equally the internal dynamics of the India-China, the bilateral impulse, independently of what the US was likely to do, was definitely there. I mean, there is a strand of thinking which you mentioned, on particularly the economic side, about finding a new equilibrium or finding a stable equilibrium in the India-China relationship. I mean, there is a disjoint between the Chinese perception, the Chinese approach, and our approach. Um, the challenge is to, find a way in which we can um, come closer and closer. The Chinese view is keep the border aside. It's a hangover from history. It will take time, and let's move on. Our approach is, look, you can't do this. I mean, there is a problem with the border. You have to address it, and once you address it, then we can move on. So there is that factor, but there is also um, the economic. So there is a security-driven approach to China, and there is an economy-driven approach. So this press note 3, which you talked
Yes,
about,
yes.
is reflective of the fact that since we want economic development at a rapid pace, can we not use Chinese investments into India as part of our own national growth project? That's the thing.
We'll come to neighborhood. Uh, we just witnessed two high intensity elections in Nepal and Bangladesh. You also served as the High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Given the present circumstances and also what happened since July 2024 protests, a curious question for us would be, did you see that coming? The protests against Sheikh Hasina and her eventual ouster. Uh, what were you thinking as someone who served there and who understood that place very well?
Look, I mean, it was quite well known that uh, she was authoritarian. I mean, she was losing popularity. But the way in which this would kind of manifest, and how the street, or how um, the people would respond or react, was not very clear. So I think once the students' agitation began in July over the reservation issue and so on, it just kind of spiraled out of control. And all it needed was a trigger or a spark, basically, to light the fire.
Right.
And that is what happened. Now, to answer your question, I mean, Sheikh Hasina is not eternal. I mean, she's not immortal. So everyone knows that at some stage or the other, um, there will be a time when she may not be in power, or she will not be in power beyond a point. The only question, of course, was that given the way she was running the country, how would any transfer of power take place? So again, the fact that there were difficulties in governance, there were criticism, severe, lots of infirmities and all that was known. I mean, we also knew it. Obviously, the people knew it there. But how it would take, what shape it would take, how quickly it would happen, how violently or peacefully it would happen, what would happen to her physically, and all of these questions were pretty much up in the open. So I think um uh, what's happened has happened. I think we have to just move forward. Uh, Bangladesh has been through these cycles
Right.
of political upheaval. That's their history.
And we might see a situation in future when the question of her extradition might emerge, uh, probably more because of the pressure from the Jamaat uh, and the number of seats that they now occupy in the
Yeah,
parliament.
yeah.
Uh, is there a way to deal with that specific
There's
question?
always a way. I mean, in politics, and foreign policy, there is always a way. I mean, this is not the only case
Right.
of this type. I mean, the region, South Asia, and our broader region is replete with such cases of political personalities being hounded out or being asked to leave and living in refuge or living in other countries. I mean, the current Prime Minister of Bangladesh,
Hmm.
he was living in London for 17 years. So he's come back to his own country for the first time in 17 years.
Right.
So there are many, many other such cases. You see Pakistan, you see, so where, one party is in power, one prime minister, he's ousted. His first port of call is Saudi Arabia or Dubai, and he stays there. And, it's a revolving door kind of situation. So I don't think we should overplay this problem. It will get resolved. There are ways to handle this situation. And, what we've done in the last few weeks through our actions is we made it very clear to Bangladesh, look, we recognize the elections. We have reached out to the new prime minister, the new government, um, and that shows that our intention is to move forward, not look back. And as far as Jamaat and all is concerned, our foreign secretary went and met the Amir. They're in the parliament. We will deal with them. Uh, and there is bigger issues now between India and Bangladesh than extradition. It should never become a single point agenda for the relationship.
Right.
I mean, that leads nowhere.
Uh, we come to Nepal. They just elected a very young uh, rapper as their leader.
Yeah.
How does the socio-political situation as well as the new political situation in Nepal, huge number of youngsters who are very social media savvy, and it can that also be is that being seen as a challenge, or is that a new opportunity which will further recalibrate India's relationship with Nepal?
See, the Nepal developments are very different from Bangladesh.
Right.
Although at one level they appear similar, but the results of the two elections have been totally different. In the case of Bangladesh, the so-called students have been basically wiped out of the election process. I mean, the results. An old established political party has come to power. In the case of Nepal, it's exactly the opposite. I mean, the Gen Z revolution took everyone by surprise. Again, there it was like Bangladesh brewing. It was simmering. Anyone who would travel to to Kathmandu or Nepal, the first thing you'd be told is frustration with the old guard, the
Right.
old political elites, which came to power after the fall of the monarchy. And they were given a long rope, I mean, from 2006 or 7 till 2025. But obviously, they didn't do great justice to themselves. This election, everyone was watching very closely what happens to the established political parties.
Right.
And it's quite amazing the result in Nepal. I would say it's extraordinary that the established political parties have been completely voted out. And a new force has actually come to power with a almost two-thirds majority, which they never expected even themselves. So the revolution, the Gen Z revolution, has actually translated itself quite seamlessly into an electoral result, which shows to you that the Gen Z revolution was genuine, and the election result corresponds to that sentiment on the street. And this 35-year-old rapper, who's the used to be the mayor of Kathmandu, I don't think the RSP themselves imagined that they would get this kind of a result. So I think Nepal is on the verge of making a new beginning. Of course, I believe within them there are some problems of leadership and coordination. So we'll have to give them time to sort that out instead of jumping in. But what I know, and we've met some of these leaders, is that they are basically looking at the economic issues of Nepal. I mean, they have a fairly less politicized and ideological view. See, the communists have been wiped out, the left. The Nepali Congress, the centrist force, also wiped out. This party is more appears to be more centrist, more focused on the economy, on the welfare issues. So there is a huge opportunity for us as India to see if we can work with them, scale up our programs, development, economic cooperation, people to people, and whatever role we can play, I would say we should in helping this party. Once there is a prime minister and it's all set down to move forward. So I think I'm positive, I'm optimistic about the relationship with this new Parliament of Nepal. And I think we have another great opportunity to do good things and move forward.
Any perspective on, sir, how the Chinese have been watching these two elections, and any idea to understand how they might react and try to.
The Chinese in the last few years have been playing an unduly interventionist role in both Nepal and Bangladesh, and it is a very cynical role. They say something, they do something else, and most of the time it is not for the good of these two countries. And this is a trend which is going to backfire on them. I mean, in the case of Nepal, let us say, for example, they spend a huge amount of energy
Mm.
in uniting the communists and the different factions,
Mm.
and going out of the way to cultivate both ethically and unethically, and doing whatever it takes. What's the result?
Right.
I mean, the result is they've been basically voted out completely.
Right.
It's one of the biggest outcomes of this election,
Right.
and they are completely wiped out. In Bangladesh, again, the Chinese were deeply penetrated even during the Hasina period.
Okay.
They always have been, um, uh, but uh, I think maybe they sense that perhaps this new government or the UNIS government before that, they were more Western oriented. They were making more sounds about closer ties with the Western world, which was very different from the Hasina period. So I'm not sure whether they like that very much. They're also watching very closely to see if Bangladesh is co-opted into some kind of an anti-Chinese coalition. So that is the other aspect. But what will happen is that when it comes down to your financial needs, development needs, infra needs, I'm not sure whether the West can deliver to Bangladesh, unlike the Chinese. They have cheap money, ready money, no questions asked. They have experience of compromising, using all kinds of questionable tactics. So it's possible that they may come back again through that route. But from a political point of view, the Americans and the British and the Europeans and all have been very vocal and open in their endorsement and support to both the Jamaat-e-Islami and the BNP.
So before we move to the concluding set of questions, sir, just a small question, given your experience, uh, especially in the neighborhood countries, the media and the national discourse in those countries, there's a lot of India-centric conversations, especially on the negative side as well. But as you discuss about the Chinese intervention, we don't see those specific news reports trickling out of their newspapers. And maybe I don't see that as a discourse uh, about what the Chinese are up to in the neighborhood countries. So, is there something more that the Indian side has to do, or what explains this dynamic?
It's structural. I
Okay.
mean, it's because of precisely our such close ties,
Okay.
links, cultural, organic with these
Right.
countries,
Right.
that India kind of has a very different standing from China in these countries,
Right.
and so um, India is always one headline away from a story, usually negative, and it's structural. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't play or interact with them the way the Chinese do.
Okay.
And the Chinese are fishing in troubled waters all the time. I mean, of course, there are differences and and criticism about India in these countries, and there are sections who uh, maybe don't like India.
Right.
So the Chinese attempt is always to exaggerate, to make the fissures wider. Uh, we have to just keep doing what we think is in the interest of the region in terms of our cooperation, relationships, and play the long game, so to say, um, both in terms of actions on the ground as well as in terms of the narrative and the mind space. I We can always make the case we should do more. I mean, in the case of Bangladesh, the amount we did in terms of outreach, people to people, was huge, extraordinary. But did that help? Not really. In the case of Nepal, we have an open border. China does not have. I mean, there are millions of Nepalese working in India.
Right.
There is national treatment given to Nepalese. This, that. So, you can argue and ask this question, which you have done. Why is it not the case? And the answer to that is that it is, in a sense, structural. It is the asymmetry. It is a burden of history, culture,
Right.
everything combined, which makes these smaller countries, which drives them to have or to strive for a separateness from India, without which they feel that their sovereign, independent existence is somehow threatened.
Right. So you joined as the deputy NSA at a time when the NSA office expanded, and a lot of activities came under its ambit. How do you see that transition? Because it was a very interesting time, 5 6 years ago. Uh, what were the driving factors behind the sudden, say, expansion of the NSA office? Please share your
Yeah,
thoughts.
sure. No, I won't call it expansion. I'll call it a reorganization and a modernization,
Okay.
because the NSCS was established about 1999 or 2000,
Right.
around that time, and that is also the time when, after the nuclear explosions, the post of the NSA was created. Since then, more or less, it remained static. But then, after the elections of Prime Minister Modi, uh, there was a review, and it was felt that national security issues had become much more complex. Our institutions were not geared to meeting those challenges, which were organic, interlinked, unforeseen, and taken new dimensions. So that is what led to a revision or a review of the structure. And so in 2018 was when finally the new structure was approved.
Right.
And the National Security Council Secretariat was given a place in the government apparatus, in the government structure, which it did not have before. Um, so there was an increase in, so for example, there was a focus on technology, on intelligence, of course, on internal security, and on cyber security, on later on other things have happened, such as the creation of the Maritime Security Coordinator. Um, then, of course, there was a post of a military advisor.
Right.
So all of these were strengthened, and you had a system where from one deputy NSA you had three deputy NSAs, each heading these. So the calculation was that you needed to have a structure that was complex enough and large enough to deal with these emerging threats.
Right.
And that is what the background is. And today you have a much stronger, well-staffed, and every country in the world, every major country has this. It's not only India. In fact, we were the odd man out. And so this is typically staffed by civil service, by military, by intelligence. So it's cross fertilization. It's based on expertise. The idea is to make it highly professional,
Right.
and able to think for itself, anticipate, provide solutions, and also help ministries deal with complex challenges which go beyond one ministry. So you have to understand that national security is not a internal security, let us say, is a much bigger issue than Ministry of Home Affairs, or national security is a much bigger issue than, say, foreign policy. Similarly for defense ministry. So there are many cross-cutting themes, issues which transcend one or two ministries. So even in that role of coordination, of getting everyone together, of getting a common position, all of that they played a role. So you needed to generate. See, without hard security, nothing happens, and you have difficult borders, difficult threats, traditional, non-traditional, from the sea, from the land, from all kinds of domains, now space, underwater. Right. So all of that had to be put together. Technology, as we today know, has become the new frontier of national security. Absolutely. This was all the logic which went into it.
And sir, from a layman's point of view, uh, hypothetically, we take a situation where there's a senior diplomat who's looking into the neighborhood from the MEA, and there's a senior diplomat in the NSA office again looking at the neighborhood. How does that role differ, and how do you bifurcate those two roles?
No, the roles differ because the perspectives are different. And from the NSCS, you see it from a bigger lens.
Okay.
You are not doing day-to-day
Right.
job of MEA or of MHA or of MOD.
Okay.
That's not your mandate. That is the job of the ministry, because the ministry at the end of the day is responsible to the parliament. And they are the executive operational head. As NSCS, what you do is you step back a bit, look at medium-term trends, long-term trends. You try and gather everyone in the room to look at a particular issue. Let's say a question like Myanmar. It has internal, it has external, it has border, it has state governments. So you try to bring everyone together and have a holistic view. But at the end of the day, implementation, operationalization has to be done only by the ministry concerned. So uh, it also depends a lot on individuals. I mean, how they perceive their roles. So far, they have maintained this distinction between what is the role of a ministry and what is the role of the NSCS.
We'll also talk about your work at the NatStrat and your initiatives. Uh, when the think tank started, we were also we were relatively young than we are now, and it came as a very interesting development. Uh, what were the initiatives, and how did NatStrat came up as a strategic affairs think tank? What was the driving idea?
It's a good question, because Delhi is a very crowded place as far as think tanks are concerned.
Right.
And the idea here basically was, we are privately funded. The idea was that we come up with an institution which is small, and which is professional, objective, which puts across the Indian perspective on global issues, on internal issues, because it's important. Because as India is growing, there's more interest in India, as you can see across the world. People are looking for content which is typically from Indian scholars, from the Indian mind.
Absolutely.
It's very important for us to put our viewpoint across globally. And it's also very important for us to provide a platform where others can understand us better. That was one purpose of NatStrat. We are not into quantity. We prefer to keep quality as the premium. We publish, but not too much. We have events, podcasts, etc., but we try to keep it at a manageable limit. And I think in the last 3 years, we've done fairly well in the sense of developing a reputation. We have lots of international visitors, linkages. We have a fairly active website. We get a lot of contributors both from India and from outside India. There's a lot of interest. So I think there is interest overall in hearing and reading about India from Indians, how they see issues. Because that's a real problem today, that if there's any major global issue, how do you, and there is all kinds of different narratives and perceptions. It's important for an Indian perspective to also
Absolutely.
be on the table.
We'll also take this opportunity to share your
Yeah,
new
yeah,
initiative, India's Strategic Autonomy, a special feature, edited by you and Mr. Rajkumar Sharma. And it has a very interesting set of contributors, including former foreign secretaries.
yes,
Uh, it has distinguished journalists, distinguished scholars. So it's a very interesting collection of, I would say, research papers, including our strategic economy, as the name says it, a paper on grand strategy,
yeah,
which has
yeah,
been a long standing conversation since the last 30
yeah.
years. And then we have so many other sub themes that flow out of from India's quest for strategic economy and strategic autonomy. And then we have a section on geopolitics, economics, and technology. So please tell us about this initiative and uh, how this also contributes to the existing scholarship and existing discourse given national security and foreign policy.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we also work on as at the intersection
Right,
of foreign policy, security, technology. That intersection is complex, it's not easy to define, but it exists and it's a reality of life.
right,
So, one of the other things which we do, and this publication is an example, is we like to do good research, we like to invite different opinions, and we like to put the Indian voice across. So, we started this end of last year when the world was going through so much of turbulence. It still is, and this whole question of strategic autonomy and India became a subject of great comment outside India. So you had a situation where foreigners were writing about India's strategic autonomy.
yes,
They were interpreting strategic autonomy for us.
like Rand Corporation
Yeah,
on does India have a strategic
correct.
future? Yeah.
And everyone was commenting and writing freely, except the Indians. And so there was this big gap about what do Indians themselves say about strategic autonomy? Why is it so difficult for the West or for the Russians or for the Chinese, for that matter, to understand this concept? And I found that we did not actually have any compilation of views on what Indians themselves think of their strategic autonomy. What does it mean for them? So we invited all these very nice and very respectable contributors to write for us. And the interesting thing is they all readily agreed because they were all thinking of this issue about what should be India's foreign policy, what should be India's place in the world, how should India respond to the Ukraine, to the Trump shock, to oil, and to everything else. And so they were all very happy to contribute, and this is the result. And so this will, I hope, be a good reference point and material for anyone who wants a contemporary interpretation of this issue. On non-alignment and all, we've had lots of things,
Right,
but that's a
right,
past. This is 2025.
right.
By the time it was published, of course, we had the West Asia crisis. This had gone into print before that. But even in the West Asia problem today, the idea about how India should deal with competing powers becomes very important. So and this generated a lot of interest
Okay.
among academics, among the diplomatic community, and we're planning a public discussion on it next month. So I just hope that it provides enough food for thought
Right.
for scholars everywhere, for diplomats, for practitioners, to understand, what this term means. So there is definitional issues, there are operational issues,
Right.
there is an issue of historical evolution
Right.
of where we began from 1947, where we are today. So it's a whole set of issues.
We'll end with a parting question, sir. The last question. We have a very serious crisis in West Asia. We've had our share of problems with the way India-US relationship panned out, at least in the first half of 2025, till uh, some conversations really made a breakthrough. And then we've had we've had a troubled neighborhood on the west, and India is very clear that it has to go for strategic autonomy. So my question, given these conditions, is that will that entail that the Indian foreign policy will acquire a securitized approach, or will it still, say, delve into many other themes of soft power, influence through different means? Or do you think this is a time where we cannot afford uh, to be soft?
No, sometimes there are circumstances which force you in a certain way.
Right,
So if circumstances force you to securitize yourself,
right,
you can't help it. I mean, if there is a Pahalgam incident,
right,
you're forced to react.
absolutely,
So you can't help it.
right,
So sometimes things are beyond your control.
right,
I mean, if the Americans and the Israelis decided to invade and bomb Iran,
right,
um, what do? I mean, you have to uh, hunker down and ensure that the energy livelihood of your people is guaranteed to the extent you physically can do it alone. So sometimes these things are not in your control.
right.
Um, but so if you look at the record from 2020
Hmm.
till today, what you see is a series of external shocks which we have faced as a nation. None of our doing, they were just imposed on us. And at every shock, we had to respond. We had to firstly defend and protect, let alone advance our interests. So, no nation can progress just on soft power and values alone. I mean, we have to have defense capability, national resilience, strong economy, manufacturing, innovation. All of this is part of the same package. And foreign policy, at the end of the day, is just one, but a critical input into your national project and your grand strategy. And the national project, as far as I'm concerned, is to grow as fast as you can and as quickly as you can. And if I have to, you know, kind of moderate or steer my
Right,
foreign policy
right,
to suit that end objective, whether it is energy, whether it is critical materials, whether it is semiconductors, whether it is defense manufacturing, I just have to do it. And so I have to follow multiple uh, dimensions of foreign policy. And where values and soft power helps me, I'll use that also. I
right.
mean, like in the neighborhood or Southeast Asia or Buddhism or wherever else.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful
Thank you very much.
answers, and it was really helpful, especially the way you gave us the much needed peak, much needed insight into the foreign service as well as
Thank you.
the broader national security framework. Thank you so much, sir, again,
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
and
Great being with you.
hope you enjoyed this session with Ambassador Saran. And we'll be back with another new episode. Thank you so much, and please subscribe our channel.